Welcome to the first segment of Aircraft, Artifacts, and Anecdotes. And I'm the historian for the 305th Air Mobility Wing, Mr. Stuart Lockhart, here to talk to you about some of the aircraft, some of the items of wear, and some of the stories concerning your heritage as airmen flying the Air Force's mission in defense of our country. In today's segment, I want to talk about the flight jacket. You talk about one piece of clothing that perhaps best identifies pilots, air crew, boom operators, flight engineers. Nothing is more symbolic of those flying positions than the flight jacket. And here today we're going to talk to you about how is it that the current A2 flying jacket that I have here to my right came from the World War II period flight jackets, to include this original A2 flying jacket from World War II and from the China-Burma India Theater, and then also some different versions of flight jackets, such as the B3 that has been used to, and symbolized then the bomber jacket or the flight crew of the heavier aircraft that flew during World War II. Okay, so this is an original World War II period A2 flying jacket. And as you can see, the Air Transport Command, sort of a forerunner twice removed of the current Air Mobility Command that all of us fall under. You can see a lot of the insignia was made out of leather. It was period or theater made from local sources, which was very common to that era. Now, if you open up this jacket, however, it has some very interesting features, to include the fact that it contains what they call the blood shit. So sort of the identification tags if a pilot or air crew was forced down, and certainly a lot of the languages were not well known to the pilots and aircrew, the Americans that were flying in these regions. They could show this to the local population, who would then tell them, hey, we're friendly, and if you get us back to friendly forces, then you will be compensated for your time. So this jacket, coming from the China-Burma India Theater, known as the CBI Theater, has, of course, the American flag with some of the various languages, such as Chinese, Burmese, etc. It's also got the nationalist Chinese flag in there with the Chinese script, as well as Burmese, current Myanmar, and a Burmese, one of the dialects of Burmese, shown in the jacket. And again, if forced down, the pilot, the air crew, could show this to the local and get some help. The other really fascinating part about this jacket, still sewn in behind these blood shits, are the silk escape maps that they would have on them. So if the aircraft crashed, and perhaps they could strap on maybe their pistol belt with a canteen, something of that nature, maybe some rudimentary rations, they would have enough mapping on their person to be able to begin to escape and evade as we would know today. And included in their jacket was also, and you can feel it, still sewn into the coat, is an escape kit, which would include a compass and some of the rudimentary materials for just survival. So here you have a jacket that's hard wearing, is relatively warm, but also containing all the survival means that they would need if forced down in a very remote area. And if I opened up the current A2 flying jacket, made by Pops here, the current day, and this is for one of our current members of the wing, it has some of those same features that we would have had back then. So you wonder where it all came from. It came from this period and has been carried forward to the current day. Okay, so you're probably wondering now, if this jacket was so great and above all great looking like the A2, why is it that after only about 10 years of service that it would be canceled? And the main reason was it was found not to be warm enough, especially in climates like in Europe, where, okay, it's just much more colder aloft in Europe, and they needed heavier clothing. So the idea then became, we're going to replace this jacket with a series of cloth jackets, which became known as the B10 and the B15 series. Quite frankly, those jackets, while perhaps having a longer life, were not as popular, at least in terms of look, as the A2. And what was interesting is then after a hiatus of almost 40 years, and this sort of came up interestingly around the movie Top Gun in the 1980s. There was a re-interest in flight jackets and flight jacket wear, and the Air Force in about 1988 brought the A2 flying jacket back into service, and it is currently what you are wearing today. So it's kind of interesting. It has not been a continual line of use of the A2. It was, 1930s through World War II. If you still had one, you held on to it in the aftermath. But then there was a break in the action until the 1980s when it was brought back as an item. But as I mentioned, the A2 did have limitations, and again, warmth was always an issue. And for the aircrew who were going aloft in aircraft at higher altitudes, but who had more room to maneuver in like a large multi-engine aircraft, they had heavier weights of jackets as well. So what we have right here, and this is actually a jacket that was assigned to a member of the 364th Bombardment Squadron of the 305th Bombardment Group. So this is actually attributed to a veteran of the Can-Do, a past member of the Can-Do group then, but wing now. But you can see this is, when you think about the bomber jacket, this is what the B-3 jacket really is. It is a fur-lined, shearling-lined jacket, very warm, very heavy. That's certainly in something like a single-engine fighter. With the confined cockpit, you couldn't really wear this in something like that as effectively. But in a larger aircraft, but where you needed to be layered up with warm gear, it was the jacket that really came to identify the aircrew, the 8th Air Force bombing crews, flying B-17s, flying B-24s over Germany during World War II. Now this jacket was worn with a layering system. There was even a thermal underwear that could be plugged into the electrical outlets in the aircraft, so kind of an electrically heated suit that they wear under this. They also had bibs that would go with this as well, pants that were fully shearling lined as well. And while perhaps this jacket was, I would say, on popularity level, not to the level of the A2, anyone who could get a hold of a B-3, to include ground crew, maintenance personnel, they would wear one because it was warm, and yes, it too looked cool. And the other facet about these jackets, both the A2 and the B-3, was the fact that they became a form of showing off what you'd done and who you were affiliated with. So you talk about leather flight patches of that era, painted insignia. Bomber crews would often paint the nose art of their aircraft on the backs of these jackets and then paint the missions that they had been on. Maybe by representing by a bomb would represent a mission that they had gone on a particular day, and showing the number of missions that they had gone on. Maybe the number of victories that they had achieved over the enemy. So in some ways they became a very iconic, this was reputation that they were showing in each of these jackets, and why consequently, as an item, they are among some of the most popular items of military clothing ever. With original period examples, with original artwork going at premium prices on the collector market. So again, why is it that you wear flight jackets like this? They have a functional piece to them, but they also have a very sort of a reputational piece as well, and one that as you go around wearing these jackets, wear them with pride, because a great many have gone before you wearing them in harm's way as well.